Human trafficking has garnered significant attention at local, national, and international levels due to heightened awareness and growing concerns about safeguarding individuals susceptible to exploitation. Within this broad context, the tourism industry has emerged as a crucial component of human trafficking network. Through this webinar, participants will gain insights into distinguishing between human trafficking and human smuggling, understand the various forms of trafficking prevalent in the tourism sector, and acquire knowledge necessary to recognize specific indicators within the industry. Before we begin, I'll introduce our presenter. Our presenter today is Constable Chris Martin from the Saskatoon Police Service. Constable Martin serves as an investigator within the Vice Human Trafficking Unit of the Saskatoon Police Service. He is a 14-year member that has been with the Human Trafficking Unit since 2022. Part of his responsibility in this role includes education. Throughout his career, Constable Martin has been involved in numerous human trafficking investigations and has acquired understanding and experience in both the sexual service and the labor trafficking aspect of the human trafficking industry. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. So I'm going to start this. I'm going to be honest, it's my first webinar, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so usually when I do my presentations, they're live, and I am not a formal person, so it's going to be a different take for me. I'm from England. I have an accent, so if someone doesn't understand what I say, I usually say put your hand up, but maybe throw it in the chat function, and Nick can interject if someone does have questions. I know he likes to keep questions to the end, so we'll try and go through. And basically give the idea on human trafficking. As he said, I'm from the Vice Human Trafficking Unit. We're predominantly aimed at sex trafficking, and that's what a lot of my presentation is going to be on. That being said, I will touch a little on the labor trafficking side of things, and hopefully give some tips on how to identify potential victims and just signs of human trafficking, which can be used in work and out of work. So when we go into human trafficking, when a lot of people think of human trafficking, they'll get images right away, and those images will be something along these lines. It will be the sex workers, which is someone on the street, or it'll be someone kidnapped, someone tied up. A lot of people have seen Sound of Freedom and think it's all related to kids being kidnapped. I'm going to challenge the concept, and we're going to go with this as victims of human trafficking. There's a good chance that all of these people would be victims of human trafficking. There's no set demographic, and the longer I've been in this unit, we do a lot of proactive checks with girls in the industry. So if they're advertising for sexual services, we'll go out and do checks, go and meet the girls, pretend to be a client, and we'll go and meet them. And I can tell you that through my time, there is no set age, there's no set demographic that's encompassing. But they cover all kinds of people. So why should you care? Now, this presentation, I was telling Nick, is morphed from presentations I give to all kinds of groups. But the fact that you've signed up to be here, I'm hoping you want to be here and not that you're told to be here. If you've been told to be here, I apologize. I'll try and make it interesting. But at the end of the day, when it comes to human trafficking, the trafficking of people who are trafficking other humans, they're not nice people. They're nearly always linked to drug trafficking and firearms trafficking. And with that, they bring violence, they bring a host of other crimes. And when it comes to the tourism industry, they're going to bring violence and those crimes into your world and into your business. Be that with sex trafficking or labor trafficking, if they're bringing those people in, then they know there's some jeopardy there, and they're going to try and insulate themselves and protect themselves. And if you get caught in the middle, they don't have your best interests at heart. So it's, yeah, that's why I'm hoping people take a good interest in what I'm going to say. As say human trafficking, a lot of people will get it conflated or mixed up with smuggling. Now, smuggling is when you're crossing borders, so that's going to be people being brought to and from Canada. Uh, Being the prairies, we don't have a big influx of immigrants coming in. I will not say it's not there; it is there. We have trouble infiltrating that world. Um, Comes from a couple of different things. A lot of the people that are involved in labor trafficking are immigrants. And when it comes to immigrants in Canada, they've been told if you speak to the police, you're going to be deported, they're going to arrest you, or they may just have threats, and the traffickers know their family and know their history back home. So they present barriers to us on accessing those victims and getting any sort of information from them to get a file going. There was one recently down towards Gull Lake that the RCMP did, and that came back through happenstance on the victim coincidentally having access to someone in, just say, in power and with some influence, and was able to subtly disclose to them that they needed some help, and that file got going that way. But otherwise, for us to reach out to these people, it can be quite tricky to understand them. The bottom one is organ trafficking, covered under the criminal code. It's illegal to traffic someone for organs, to sell someone's kidneys, etc. There's never been a known case for charges or court-related proceedings with organ trafficking in Canada. It's largely because our health system is good enough that it doesn't need to occur. As I say, sex trafficking is where we'll focus a lot of our presentation on. That's where we do a lot of our work on, and it's the most prolific and most reported throughout Canada. We'll do some dry slides, so you understand the basis of where the law comes from. A lot of people may know the Bedford decision, 2014. Some adult sex workers went to the courts and said, it's our constitutional right to work in the sex industry. And they made the appeal. The Supreme Court said, yeah, you know what? It is their right. Some of the outdated laws were infringing on their right to work. So the Supreme Court said to the government, you've got a year to fix it. And the government rushed through the Protected Communities and Exploited Persons Act. What this did is it copied some acts and legislation from around the world and went with the Nordic model, which very much focuses on making those selling sex or those being trafficked as the victims, as opposed to before, those people would often be charged for selling sex, for providing those services that are illegal. So the reform was good for the victims and enables us to focus our efforts on people that need our attention. When the government did this, there was a push to make it legal, make sex legal. There was a lot of consultation. They looked at Amsterdam, they looked at Norway, a lot of the different European countries that have gone to this Nordic model of victim-centric, victim first, and focusing around having those selling their services as a victim. And they stopped short of completely legalizing it. So although they legalized sale of sex, they did put a lot of constraints on when this can occur. To put it bluntly, no one can legally buy sex. No one can assist in profiting from that person's work. So if it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, if the person has advertisements online, or they are doing text messaging or any sort of contact for them, or moving a person from their residence to place of work, if someone's doing that for them, that's illegal. It has to be that person working for themselves alone, and then they are benefiting 100% from their money. So the law, it helps, but it does get a little tricky anyone can sell their own sex, is what it comes down to, but it is illegal to buy it, and it's illegal for anyone to help. So when you understand uh, the sex world and understanding how and why it happens, it gives you a good foundation on understanding why you may come across these people in your industry. When we talk about pimps in the sex world and trafficking world, a lot of people will have an image already in their mind. Now, that image is again being thrown out the window the same as the victims are. I've seen victims that are, sorry, pimps that are everywhere from age 20, a female, white female 20-year-old, to the 60-year-old white guy, every ethnicity I've seen charged within the last few years in Saskatoon. So again, the genders are, so the gender types and different stereotypes are being thrown out the window, and we want to keep an open mind when we're going into those investigations. In the same way, when you're looking at your businesses, don't uh, don't pigeonhole yourself into thinking whether someone may or not be involved in the game. Now, if you're reading the slide, you'll see the fact that I mentioned the word bottoms in there. When a female enters the industry in the sex world, they'll start at the bottom and they'll slowly work their way up through seniority. And when they're at the top of that chain, they become the pimp's main go-to girl. They become what is commonly known as the bottom. This girl, for all effective purposes, becomes the pimp. She collects the money, she directs the girls, and she becomes a level of insulation for the actual pimp. Now, these girls often become a hot topic when it comes to investigations on the fact that they often began at the bottom. They began as a victim, they've been recruited, and now they've become the recruiter. So when they become a part of the investigation, it becomes interesting on, do we treat them as a victim or a suspect, and how we go about that. When you're looking at the pimps and how they get girls and victims involved, you'll get the low-level pimps, which are often in the bigger cities. Um, they're running their own spouse, their own girlfriend. They're doing it for survival. They're doing it for drug money. They're doing it to pay rent. There's a lack of organization, and it's all very local. The mid-level is the most common. You have your guerrilla pimp and your Romeo pimp. Now, these two tactics are unbelievably common. The Romeo pimp bases it around becoming the love life of the victim. They'll often meet them in a bar or online dating platforms, and they slowly turn the heat up on them, meet them, make the girl fall in love with them, think they're the new Prince Charming, and they'll build that level of trust with the girl. And as that relationship progresses, they'll start introducing them to, well, why wouldn't you go hang out with my friend? Why don't you make out with him? See, that wasn't so bad. And then they'll maybe introduce a bit of cash. Well, hey, you want a couple $100? All you have to do is go and sleep with him, go and do something sexual with him. And then the next thing it'll progress to is some photographs being taken, and then they'll post their ad and begin to work them online. And then the girls feel like they're trapped. The other tactic they'll use is the guerrilla mode, and that is simply a violence tactic. They'll meet the girl, they know a bit about them, and they'll immediately start threatening them. I know where you live. I know you have a brother. Hey, he's 12. He goes to this school. He plays soccer on Tuesdays. If you don't do what I say, I'll just go pay him a visit. Which again puts these victims in a very impossible situation. And especially when a lot of them are under the age of, I would say, 20. They're very impressionable, will try and do whatever they can to protect themselves and the family, and they'll put themselves in bad situations. The next level will be the players. These guys will often have multiple girls working for them. They're largely based out of the East, be it Quebec, Montreal, Toronto, and we often see girls and workers coming through the West on what we call a circuit or a Western road swing. They'll land in either Saskatoon or Winnipeg, and they'll often rent vehicles, and they'll destination hop anywhere, sometimes Saskatchewan, Alberta, and sometimes out to Vancouver, Kelowna. And then they'll swing back and fly back from. When you see these girls and you start to think about the investigations, these pimps can control everything you see on the screen. Everything about this person's life is controlled by the pimp. However, when you think you may be looking at something and something's not sitting right with someone who's checked into a hotel or is at a resort with someone, you should never think, I need everything. Well, this girl looked like she was kind of happy, and she had to keep asking for money, but then she could go about whenever she wanted. She went back to the hotel room whenever she wanted. Pimps will often tactically allow the girls certain things at certain times. They can go from having access to almost everything to nothing within a matter of hours, and they could be left without anything for days and weeks at a time. And statistics, I haven't got to the 2023 statistics from StatsCan yet. They were just publishing them when I was putting this together. But as you see, nearly everyone that was trafficked was known by someone. So 91%, with 33% of them being an intimate partner. Those intimate partners is a huge number, and that is the Romeo pimp style of believing that they're in a relationship with this male, and then he starts working them. And then when you look at the ages, 71% of them below 25 refers to the fact that these girls are very young, very impressionable. When they see the money in front of them, all of the goods, it's often high-end items that they're being offered. They're allowed to live the lifestyle, the Instagram lifestyle, the rapper lifestyle, as we often see it online now. This is dangled in front of them, and they'll chase that, and that's how they become involved. The stat at the bottom is an interesting statistic. The national average being 1.4, and Saskatchewan's being 1.8. Does this mean that Saskatoon is a hotspot for trafficking? I'm going to be honest with you, no, it doesn't. As far as I'm concerned, what I've seen, we're no worse than anywhere else. However, when I came into the unit 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, we were very proactive. My sergeant at the time was one of the leaders in the country when it came to human trafficking investigations. And their style of investigation and proactive check and going out and starting these investigations, identifying victims, was one of the leading ways in Canada. With that became our reporting methods. So as our police service started reporting these checks and these vulnerable victims, so the statistics may have been slightly skewed, providing us with a higher number than other places which don't do any proactive checks and just don't know what's out there. Now, the trade in Saskatoon, I left this in there. No matter where you're from, if you're a city, most of them have had some sort of stroll, some sort of area where if someone's looking for sex, people knew where to get it. In Saskatoon, that was 20th Street. When I started 14 years ago, this was common. You could drive down and there would be girls up and down the street, especially in the summer. And we, as a vice unit, would go out and do proactive checks. We would go out and pretend to be Johns picking up girls, pretend to be girls for Johns. We do those drives now, we'll come across one, maybe two girls out, if that. All of this industry has moved online, with it being now legal for them to communicate. That's right, illegal for them to communicate at all. And with the progression of technology, websites and apps are where it's at. And that's where people tend to go. Leolist is a website. Leolist.cc is where we do nearly all of our proactive checks from. It's probably the biggest in Canada. I don't suggest anyone log on their company phone to do this, but that's where all of the ads are listed And that's where we as law enforcement get most of our information from. This slide, I had our analyst put together some numbers. We work with our analyst as well as the RCMP. When I had him assist in some numbers a few years ago for a presentation, he said when he had done advertisements through Leolist and through Backpages, the smallest community, I think, was 250 people that had had an ad in it. So anyone who thinks that their community is too small for human trafficking or it's just non in existence needs to pull their hair out of the sand and realize that it does exist. It is out there. It's everywhere. And it's a growing problem. Excuse me. With Saskatoon and with everywhere else, you'll see the numbers do increase. Now, as you go across, cut the date range off, but the last column there is the total in yellow. The one before that is 2023 and then 2022, and then work its way backwards. You'll notice there is a sudden peak and then a slow drop off. That is largely attributed to COVID. During COVID times, people didn't have money, they couldn't go out, and so they were forced to go online. All of these victims had no access to money, had nowhere else to make their money, and so posting online became a common theme, and often they'd have to create new ads as competition grew with the increase in advertisements online with limited platforms. The other interesting thing with the numbers is that right around the 2020 mark, we had the increase of a new platform going on called OnlyFans. So when OnlyFans came in, they saw a massive increase during the pandemic. So as the numbers increased, everyone went over to Leolist, was putting ads on during the pandemic. Enter the OnlyFans site. It's easier to sell things. You can sell pictures rather than just your body. Of course, you can sell a picture way more frequently and easier than you can a person. So if you look at the numbers on there of 2.36 billion, that's a huge amount of money, and that's just their 20% that they take. That's not all of the trade that occurred during that time. The money is continually growing. This number is pulled from a company called Trafficking that we use, and that will populate ads and scrape ads from various hosting websites that traffickers will use and sex trade workers will use to advertise their services. So they scraped that data and they made their own report here. And you can see that OnlyFans year over year, 425,000. So it's increased again. We just haven't had any updated stats for the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. The labor trafficking, as I say, it does happen. Both of these labor trafficking happened in the tourism industry, and I'd say for the most part, tourism industry is where you're going to find labor trafficking. It's easier for people to come in and out as there's continued rotating customers, and it's harder to detect. The one on the right, the Mexicans, that was a case of a hotel chain in Ontario. They had a third-party contract for cleaning staff, and trusted the fact that these people were vetted workers. Came in as just a basic Crime Stoppers tip, and it grew from there. And the investigation found they could follow people from hotels back to certain residences, and that grew and grew into more residences, and ended up having 43 different victims that were forced to be trafficked from a residence to their hotels. So when you are looking at labor trafficking, you don't always know who you're employing. It's a good idea to double check and ensure that third-party contractors are doing that job. This is an ad that I found out of the East, and it looks like a regular hotel online page. If you look at the room details on the side, it's just an ad advertising the underage girls and the parking lot view. The parking lot view is something these sex trade workers love. It's easy to see if customers come and go, and they know who they're dealing with. When you're in the industry, wanting to know what to look for, we can go through a lot of the different identity documents that we see and different things that we see that will kind of help you identify potential victims of human trafficking and people who may just be in a position that could use some assistance. The ID documents is a growing issue for us as people are replicating driver's licenses and different ID documents from various provinces, presenting them as real, and then using them for ourselves as ID, as well as for booking into hotels. This also plays a factor when you use third-party booking through Expedia and various different sites. They can photocopy in any sort of ID. It's hard to verify that, but those third-party sites will take it, and with a stolen credit card, they can do their bookings really quickly. Now, when you're looking at hotels predominantly or airports, the frequent flyers, the people who are in and out of your hotels or businesses on a frequent location, are likely should be of interest to you. A, if they're coming back to you, they're obviously of interest for business. B, knowing why they're coming. Are they coming of their own free will? Are they always controlled? And what sort of work are they doing? When it comes to sex work in hotels, the limited luggage, the girls that are traveling for one reason. They're traveling for sex work. We'll speak to girls and they won't leave their hotels. Unless they're traveling to and from a new hotel, that's it. They're there to stay. They'll get Uber Eats and skip the dishes. They don't leave. They don't have any other clothing. We're in Saskatchewan. It's warm right now. But if it's minus 40 outside and they don't have any sort of warm clothing, it's an interesting sign on why did they come to Saskatchewan? Saskatchewan isn't the biggest tourist destination in the world. And if they're here, why are they here? If they're here for work, that's great. What sort of work are they doing? And these are conversations that you guys have a lot of access to information that us as investigators don't have, and you can gain a lot from that. The dog at the bottom became a bigger red flag for us over the years when it comes to girls being shipped across the country. They'll often travel alone and they'll have a dog with them. The dog becomes a manipulation and control tactic by the pimp. They'll provide them with the dog, with the animal to travel. The girl becomes bonded, becomes their baby. If they decide that they're not going to do what the pimp says, the pimp will come or have the dog taken or hurt and use the dog as a manipulation tactic. That they will just kill a dog. It's easy to kill a dog and get away with it. So they'll use these animals just as bait. When you're in the industry that you're in, you see a lot of things that we don't have access to. Another one would be the amount of cash that they're dealing with. Are people coming into industry and they have wads of cash with them, more than would be usual? Would be another good sign. They'll often use cash because it's harder for us to track their movements. If they're using their own credit cards, their own payment things, we know who they are. We'd be able to go through different channels to be able to follow them. With stolen credit cards or going to cash, they become a lot harder to track. So it's a good red flag for us. If you see two people traveling together and there's a clear imbalance of power, there's another red flag. That being said, when you do see these signs, if you see one, it doesn't mean it's human trafficking. It's a sign of human trafficking. Does it mean it's human trafficking? No. Maybe someone just sold a vehicle for cash. They come into the casino, they're staying at the hotel, and they're just going to spend it. Doesn't mean they're a trafficker. The same thing with the presence of power. If a couple's checking into a hotel, if you ask the female something and the male answers, maybe he just knows the answer and she doesn't. It doesn't mean that he's a trafficker, but in those trafficking situations, that is a sign for us that is what is going on. Not all of the girls, when they are traveling, will have the aesthetics done. They all have hair extensions, they'll have lips done, they'll always have their nails done, quite often ridiculously long. And they'll have the eyelashes and everything else that goes along with it. If you're in a hotel, come and go traffic. I don't think that's a new one for most people. They're aware it's They're aware of what's going on if there's heavy come and go traffic. And in Saskatoon, we're lucky enough we have a good partnership that will often get good information from the hotels. The other thing is conversation. When you speak to these people and these clients, if they are booking in, make conversation with them. How you doing? Where'd you come from? Where are you going to? It's nice to be personal, but you can gain a lot of information from a small conversation. Does it mean much to you? Maybe not. But if we come in and we have concerns with someone that's in a hotel, if we can speak to your clerk, oh, you know what? Yeah, no, they said they came from Winnipeg and they drove straight here overnight through the storm and they didn't want to drive, and now they don't know where they're going after this. They don't know sure how long they're staying for. Those are all signs for us. They can be gathered very innocuously and just through casual conversation. I'm not sure if anyone here was at the hotel summit, human trafficking summit that we did, put on by Jim Bentz. I did a presentation there, and those who were there will recognize some of these slides. This bit is more geared towards the hotel industry. These next few slides, they're geared towards people and specific areas that often think they are just a front desk clerk, they're just a housemaid, they're just security. You're never just. You're always a huge piece in that puzzle when it comes to putting together the whole situation, the whole picture for us. So the front desk staff are going to be the first people that meet these girls, meet these guests, and the victims, as well as the pimps. When the people come in, they're going to book in. Majority of these people booking in are not suspecting any sort of questions to be of interest. So, hey, how are you doing today? As I said, you start asking general questions. It's good information for you guys. It's also good information for us. Now, when these people come in and they're booking third party, if the people staying there aren't the ones who pay for the room, that's a bit of a warning sign for us. A lot of these victims don't pay or book for the rooms themselves. They have someone else to book the room for them. And because they don't have access to any financial means or any funds, they're often paid for them as well. If they're asking specifically for an outside door, as I said, the come and go access, that's where that comes in. Security guards, if they're out and about, most of them have a good idea on what's going on through the rooms. They know the rooms. If the girls are staying for multiple days, they see a lot. They see the come and go traffic, and they know the sort of people and who stays in what room, especially if they're frequent flyers. Also know that if there's a complete continuous noise complaint, hey, you know what, the TV is always on in that suite. It's on 24 hours a day. The music's on 24 hours a day. Is that normal? I'm not in the industry, but from what I know from being in hotels, it isn't normal for those to be on nonstop. But these girls will leave those things on almost 24 hours a day. If they're working, it masks any noise that's coming from them. The housekeeping are the bit of the forgotten jewel in the whole thing. They have access to rooms that anyone else does not. They're able to go in, clean. If they see signs of the luggage, excessive amounts of condoms, that sort of thing in the room, that signs of repeated sexual activity more than just what one guest would have, then that's a concern for us. It's important to remember that just because someone is in the sex industry doesn't mean they're being trafficked. There are girls who do it of their own volition. They want to be in there, or they found themselves in the industry and work now independently. They just can't give up the cash. So when these girls are in there, if they're seeing these signs, it's good to know, good to report for the management. As the slide says, sorry, the increased bedding and towel use. A lot of these girls will have extra towels for guys to shower before and after intercourse, and have different bedding to switch out for their own sleeping time. So what can you guys do as an industry? The internal policy and how you see things is going to be big for us. We're trying to implement some internal provincial policy with some different hospitality industries and get some sort of structure in place for the province. Everyone seems to have their own framework, and it's not always reported in a timely fashion for us. So if you are looking looking at implementing policy, or you have ability to do so, having a process that allows us as law enforcement, be it in Saskatoon, Regina, or the RCMP, notifying the police of a potential sign, and it expedites our ability to do anything. These girls are they're sometimes in and out within 24 hours. So if someone says, hey, our policy says we're going to go and report it, we have to do up a report. It goes up to my manager, then goes to the general manager, who then oversees it. And then if he thinks it's good, he'll forward it on to the law enforcement. If it's a week or two later, unfortunately, that's often too late, and those victims are gone in the wind. Sometimes they never return back out to the West. So understanding the signs and building that infrastructure within your service or company, it's good to have and good for us to know where you guys are coming from. As I had mentioned before, when it comes to labor trafficking, know your employees. As a manager or an owner, know your employees, know your subcontractors, know where your workers are coming from. If they're immigrants, they could be here legally, they could not. Don't jump to any conclusions, get to know them, and just find out if they're good and where they're staying. And I guess, as I said, through general conversation. When you're gathering this information, it is still our job as law enforcement to do that investigation. Your job is to have the conversation, get to know people. If you see the warning signs and the red flags, let us know. We can then do the investigation there. At no point am I saying go get information and do our job for us. Don't do that. If you have a red flag, let us know. We can do the work from there. We are running into this less as people become more aware. If you have sex work in your hotel, we as law enforcement will not come and help you evict a guest just because it's sex work. Sex work is legal. And as I mentioned before with the Nordic model, these people are often victims and we will treat them as such. So their welfare is our concern, and we're not going to make them homeless or without a shelter, especially in a Saskatchewan winter. Sex work isn't human trafficking. There are girls that will make it by themselves. We run into girls who will have spreadsheets open. They'll show us their spreadsheets. They plan to make $1,000 a day, and that's a realistic number for them. They can make $1,000 a day, pay for everything, and know where their money's going. I was dealing with a victim. She was interested in getting out, and she said, "Well, can you assure me that I'm going to make $300,000 a year tax free? Because that's what I'm making right now. I can't do that." And she said, "Well, I can't get out of the industry." So just seeing sex work within your industry or within your business and hotel doesn't always mean that they're victims. They could be doing it just because the money's good. That's where they are at in life, and they're not victims at that point. So specifics on what we can get, what we would like from the industry. Times and dates of when things happen. If you're making a report, knowing when and where these things happen is important for us. Having they were here on Tuesday, or knowing when on Tuesday. Was it 2 o'clock in the morning, or was it 5 p.m.? That narrows our investigation down on when we can get different elements of the offense and knowing where we look. And if you're wondering, yes, there are dates on the screen. It's the right sense of humor. Who reported it and why? With internal policy going up through the chain, if a housekeeper sees something and they bring it to their supervisor, it then goes to their manager, to the general manager, and then to someone else before us. If we then get that report, at the end of the day, we're going to need to speak to the person who initially saw it and initially noticed it and made the complaint. We need to know how and when to reach them, because they may have more information than they put in the report, and it's good for us to get that first-hand knowledge. So when implementing the policies, having a process where law enforcement can access these people. The camera footage on the left, that is real camera footage. On the right, that's a black hole. So if you can get a picture of the black hole, I'd ask if you have camera footage in your business, make sure it's at least usable for law enforcement and for yourselves. Protects you, protects your guests. If we can't identify anyone from it, we just see a blurry image walking in and out. Unfortunately, it's really not much use to us other than the vague clothing description. And when it comes to the courts, that makes it harder for us to identify. With that camera footage, we can also follow them. So knowing they came in from the parking lot, did they come from the north side of the building, the south side of the building? Did we see them drive by in a rental vehicle just before? There are lots of different small elements we can get from the camera footage and following which way they went when they left the building and which rooms they go to when they go up or inside your building. When it comes to receipts, I know the industry keeps a lot of receipts for various purposes. Us knowing when things were purchased and how they were purchased helps us track through fraudulent means, through credit cards belonging to traffickers or even the victims, or through cash. All of those different routes can still be evidence no matter which way they go. The frequent flyers, frequent visitors, if people are coming through your hotel, they come through every month, they come for 2 days, and then they're gone again. If they always request the same room and the same outside access, that's a huge thing for us. We know there are girls who do the same thing. They've told us, and we have good relationships with them. They will pick the hotels. That's where they're comfortable. The staff know them, so they go there. If that becomes a concern for you guys, and you think, hey, you know what? This person does come through quite a bit, but they don't seem to ever have control, or they don't seem to be able to pay for anything other than their hotel room. Having that information helps us when it comes forward to the investigation. This case was from last fall. There was a male who was working as a front desk agent in the States, and he had taken his human trafficking investigation online course as the state mandated. He took the investigational course and the programming, and then a month or so later, he was in a motel. A female checked in with 2 younger girls early in the morning. He thought it was a little odd. Didn't think much of it after that. They went to their room. There was then a noise coming from the room when he was doing his rounds. Sounded like an argument. When he went to the room, he could hear the male arguing with the female about the 2 girls, and then the mention of sex. He saw 2 young girls sitting on the bed, dressed perhaps inappropriately. Through his own internal training and the state mandated courses, he called law enforcement. Ended up that guy was buying sex from I believe it was a 14 and a 16-year-old. And the female on the left was the one that was effectively pimping them out. So she had brought them there so he could buy sex from these girls, and they were arguing over how much he should be paying. So that's a classic example of internal training in the tourism industry having an integral part in us identifying the victims and being able to get them out of the situations they're in. Communication. I can't emphasize enough, if you have questions for us, be it for me on the presentation, for law enforcement on if you think you should do something or if we need to know something, get a hold of us, whether it's in Saskatoon, Regina, Estevan, or the RCMP. We all have human trafficking units now, and we're all open to talking and making those relationships. If you are from a rural community and you have questions, feel free to reach out to us in Saskatoon. We have counterparts that we have contact with. I'm happy to answer questions, and my 4 other people in the team I work with are also happy to answer the questions if I'm unavailable for whatever reason. Doesn't matter where you are in the province. We're here to be on the same team and help out. And lastly, our contacts. I'll leave this up for a bit. As Nick said, I'm Chris. My sergeant is Kelly Tryon, and then that's the rest of the team that I work with. Feel free to email any of us. At the bottom is our Vice email. If you want to contact us generically, you can do that. My cell phone number on there is my work cell phone number. I'm open to contact if someone has concerns that aren't life-threatening. Give me a text, give me a call. I'm okay with that. If you have immediate concerns, please don't call our cell phones. Call the 911 number. Um, most of us check our phones even on days off, but they're not monitored 24/7. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead, email me, contact me via cell phone, and that's my whole presentation. Nick, I'm not sure if you're still there or if there are any questions on the chat.
Just jumping back on. Um, thank you for that. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to just pop that in. I just have one. Do you find that there's certain, I guess, either timeframes or periods or seasons where this might be more prevalent than others?
No. In short, these girls, when it comes to sex trafficking, it's 24/7, 365 days of the year. It's interesting when it comes to busy times for the girls. If it's a big cold snap, they'll often say that it's quieter. The heavy snowfall, the big storm we had girls, and they said it was super busy during that time, which surprised us. Although we have had talk of snow removal contractors and people who are working on night shifts through that, having access to some free time and benefiting from that free time. So no, when it comes to sex work, it's all year round. Obviously, when it comes to the labor trafficking, it's seasonal when the work and demand is there.
Right. And oh, yeah, just someone made the comment of thank you, horrifying but necessary to address.
You're welcome.
And then just another question. Is it predominantly, I guess, female sex workers, or do you see it being also male sex workers? And is that, I guess, a thing or an industry? I'm gonna not really promote it as an industry, but is it a thing for that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are through Leo List as I said, is our main go-to for advertisements. There are males and there is a transsexual portion of that website. We in the over the last few years, we haven't done too many male projects. They are there when checks have been done. They are largely independent, and there's a lot less cash for sex transactions as opposed to an exchange of services. So when it comes to the victimization and human trafficking element, I'd say it is less so from my experience, but it does exist.
Perfect. Thank you so much.